Welcome back. Today we're going to be doing some Raspberry Pi stuff, particularly working with a Raspberry Pi Zero. If you go back a few episodes ago, I mentioned getting this in and we looked at it a little bit and we talked about it a little bit. But I wanted to build an enclosure for it, and I'm going to try to do as much of that as possible in this video. Unfortunately, I only had so much time to do this tonight to get it up for this Thursday, which is my normal upload night. However, we're going to do as much of this, like I said, as possible. Now, the idea is we're going to try to combine a Raspberry Pi Zero, a powered USB hub, a USB 10100, 1000, basically a gigabit Ethernet port, and various other little bits and bobs here. And I'm not sure if I want to use this smaller project box that I got during a recent mailbag video. Interesting thing about this box is it actually already has some pieces cut out in it, as you can see right there at the top. Not sure why it came to me like that, but I got this off of eBay. And then here's your traditional box that you get from Radio Shack, and this is just something I had lying around. It's actually pretty interesting the way the plastic mold in this looks like flames. But anyway, this box here obviously is much larger, so it'd be easier to fit things into. But I kind of really want to do it in the smaller box. And all this stuff comes apart pretty easily. If you look at this unit here, there's a couple screws, and then this shell just comes apart. We'll take that apart in a moment. And this USB hub I've had apart many times. This just unclips and it pops right out. And of course we have the power supply for that. Now, I mentioned in previous videos, my idea was, if you look at this particular device, it has two USB ports, and one of those ports is actually power in, and that's the top one here, and the bottom one here you can turn into a USB port, a full-size one. It's actually a USB OTG, or on-the-go connection, and that's what this is right here. And this is just from like a Samsung tablet. And if you take a regular cable like this and also plug it in, you can see you have the USB end. And then of course you can go from there. So I don't know if I mentioned this in other videos or not, but I had these short wires that I actually purchased for my Chromecast, and that way you don't have a long piece of cable behind your TV. And the interesting thing about this, it came with two wires, and you can see you can actually put these next to each other. So the idea was if you take this wire here and connect a regular USB connection to the hub, you can get 4 ports out of this. But since this is powered, you can actually take one of this USB cord here and plug it in and have this Pi basically get powered off of the same USB hub that is providing power to the other devices you got plugged in. So it's kind of like a loop, but you don't really have to worry about it because there's no data coming out of this, so you won't have to worry about any kind of like a data redundancy loop, or if that's even possible. But the power does definitely loop through, which is good. So I started thinking of ways to maybe remove the diode that's in here, so when you plug this in, you can actually backfeed the power right up here, and you wouldn't actually need this connector at all, and then you can just use this one to do everything in a sense. And I'm not sure if that's possible or not, but that's one of the things I wanted to try to experiment with. And the other thing was, I looked at the pin out, and normally USB has 4 pins. There's a positive, a negative, and then data plus, data minus. But on the smaller end, the micro end, there's actually more pins, and one of them is a sense pin. And the USB on-the-go cable just shorts out ground to sense, and that's what you need to translate this. Now, on a regular cable like this, it wouldn't have those two shorted out. So the thing is trying to fit this all together with the proper cabling, and also possibly using the pads that are on the back here, is going to be how we're going to have to do this. I mentioned this cable because you can actually make these come out the sides like this, which kind of streamlines things. The only thing is the HDMI connection. You still actually need some kind of an adapter like this to bring it to full HDMI, as you can see there. So this is going to possibly get worked into the actual finished product, or we're just going to have this port exposed, but then we don't really want these to be exposed because we're not going to use those, hopefully. So this is all going to fit together in a pretty interesting way, and I know there's a million ways to do this. The idea is I'm running RetroPie, and this is just going to allow me to play various video games, but I'm building this as a kind of general purpose box. I want this to be able to be reprogrammed into a regular, computer if I want, and not necessarily just for gaming. People do build these in the Game Boys and stuff like that for that purpose, and especially because it's portable. But I want this to be something we can use on the desk, or maybe hook it up to a TV or something like that. So I just want to build it in a project box like that. Also, I have pieces of Vero board here. I have different USB connectors that I purchased, all parts of other videos, as I always mention when I get these things in. Maybe a voltmeter here for something. So I have all these little pieces that I thought maybe we can cram into this. So I'm going to pause for a second, take these out of their cases so we can see what they look like. And that's pretty much open. No big deal. They just, like I said, couple screws, pops apart. Now the nice thing about the Ethernet board here is it has a connector for the USB, so we can actually pop this wire right out of here, and this could possibly be reused. Of course, we're going to be using these USB connectors eventually, because we're going to need to do some wiring here, and why not just use regular USB cables, because that's the easiest way to do it. Obviously, it's already set up for that purpose. But taking a good close look at this board, you can see it's got a pretty small form factor other than the large connector, as to be expected. But we can actually slip that right in this box. Like, it fits pretty good, and actually I could put the lid on no problem, as you could see. So that's definitely a viable option, because that's the tallest component. Then if we take a look at the USB connections here, this little board it's pretty thin. Now this is where I mentioned this is that big diode. This is what's preventing the electric from coming from this port and going through the various pieces here and then back feeding back that way. If you plug this directly into a computer, it's going to receive power from the computer, but if you need more power out of these USB ports, you're not going to get enough, because there's not enough coming out of the computer. So you plug in external power. That's the idea of a powered USB hub. But what I want to do is backfeed that power back down that line to the Raspberry Pi. But looking at this, it fits in this box almost. Like, the ports come right to the edge here and right to the edge there, which is sweet. I kind of had an idea of having like 2 ports in the front for plugging controllers in, and then 2 ports coming out of the back for maybe a keyboard and mouse or a thumb drive or something that you don't need to access all the time, and then also having the power port in the back. But that is perfect. The only thing is the input port is facing forward, and we don't necessarily want that. I guess we could put everything in here and maybe have wires connecting everything, which, if I could find a short cable like this with a regular USB end on it like that, and this, or better yet, actually the piece that fits in here, we could plug that in and then plug it into the Pi below with the micro end on it. Basically, we need a mini to micro short piece of wire, and that would, you could do that, but I want to do all the wiring internally, so all you'll see on the outside of this is just the ports. So we may have to perhaps modify this board, desolder this, remove it, connect the wires directly to it. There's a variety of different things we're going to do. Also, if we take a look at this, you could see the LEDs actually they're the highest. They're the ones that sit the most proud of anything, and then actually these are low profile capacitors, but they still sit taller than the USB ports, so those would be the next tallest thing. But I want to actually desolder those and actually have them next to the ports, perhaps, or maybe put them all together and make like a kind of like a bar graph little display that we could put someplace on the case, and then just have the wires run back to the board here. And I kind of worked with this a little bit. I believe I marked it out, but the markings may have actually worn off the board. But we got to actually trace out, before I go any further, and figure out which port goes to which light, because there's no correlation to it. It doesn't say. I mean, it says LED 1, LED 2, but that doesn't line up with the actual connectors. So connector 1 doesn't line up with LED 1 basically. So once we map that out, it'll make that a little bit easier. Plus, they're all the same ground, so we actually, even though there's 5 LEDs, we'll only need 6 wires going to them, and that'll make wiring it a lot easier. So I'll have to modify that. So I think I'll probably get that taken apart first. We can mount it sideways in the board like this if we want, and that's the other option. Since I do have these USB ports and I do have a piece of perf board, I can actually insert this in, as you can see, and I can get 4 of those straight across. And I'll just dump that out of there for a second, show you we can actually just put this right in the bottom. And the good thing about this is anything I need to make for this, I can make it all on perf board and then just build the case based around that. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of thought process. And I did mention a little bit of this in other videos, but this is perhaps this is going to be a 2-part thing, because like I said, I only have so much time to do this particular project now. I wanted to get a video up. I was working on the LED 8x8x8 cube in the last 2 episodes before this, but I need to get out to my shed and get to the drill press to do all the template stuff. And you know, being that there's a couple feet of snow in front of the thing right now, I can't get out to it. So I have to put that off to the weekend. So obviously the next video after this will probably be that. But for now, I wanted to work on this a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is kind of just think this over for a minute. And with that, I'm going to pause the camera, obviously, but I'm going to think about this for a minute and see what the best course of action is going to be, and we're going to go with that. Well, it seems that there's an infinite amount of options available to me. Kind of perplexed by this, how exactly I want to do this. At first thought, I was thinking, like I said, we can get a couple ports out the back this way. By the way, the spacing on all of these ports, even the DC jack and everything, is the same as a perf board here. So if I actually wanted to remove any of these components, at least the jacks, I can just do so and put it onto a separate board. So that's definitely a viable option. I did actually notice on here that there's these 2 closed solder holes. You can see there. One's positive and the other is negative. I've actually marked the other side of the board. It's the same thing. But I traced everything through here, and it seems like I can actually suck the solder right out of those holes and just insert wires and run that to the bottom of the Raspberry Pi here. These 2 pads, one's positive, one's negative. I know for a fact, I just didn't mark it out yet. And the other one here, these are the 2 data connections. So between that and that, there's your USB connection. So I definitely can run back to this. It's just a matter of getting all this desoldered for sure. And I wrote this down. This is just a little diagram. I did this a while back. I'm not sure if this was in a previous video or not, but if I lay this on top here, where it says DC in, that lines up with this here. And I have connector 3, connector 4, USB in. Actually, these are swapped, but connector 2, connector 1, these are all the same, and the power LED 1, 2, 3, and 4 lines up, and I just drew out where this goes. So LED 2 connects to connector 3, connector 4 is LED 4, connector 2 is LED 1, and connector 1 is LED 3. So I guess they kind of sort of correlate, even though it's in a straight line. This goes here, this goes here, and it doesn't line up right. So I'm going to go ahead, fire up the soldering iron, and get all this taken apart to make it a little bit easier to figure out too. Alright, we did a bunch of stuff here, and unfortunately I'm going to have to cut this video short at this moment, so there will be multiple parts to this video, and there'll be other things to look at later. But what I did was I actually took the USB hub and I removed the DC jack, the USB input, and then the 2 ports over here, so we're just left with 2 ports. And I actually cut and sanded down this edge here so it could fit perfectly into this case, and that will allow us to have 2 ports facing in one direction. I also took all 4 posts out of here because it was easier just to get this into the far corner like that. And I also ended up putting some solder onto the 2 pads here. I did research it. PP1, which is this top pad, is the 5-volt lead. The bottom one below it is ground. That's PP6, and then over here PP22 and PP23 are the data plus and data minus respectively pins, or pads we'll call them. So that's where we're going to get our power in and our USB in out connections to right there. Didn't really do anything else in this, although I will mention, since the last time I showed this in the previous video, I did actually put the header on here for the run pins and for the composite video pins, just in case I decide to put a jack on there. Well, the way I decided to do this is we're going to have 2 ports facing this direction, and I'm going to try to mount the Pi so the HDMI port faces out the back like that, and we'll try to get it in the corner so we can possibly access the SD card from the side over here, and that leaves a good amount of area on the side over here open. Now unfortunately I can't take this jack and put it out the back, which is how I'd really like to do it, because you can see the board's too long. I can do it out the side. In fact, if you see, we can put this up here in the corner, and even though this says the GPIO header on it, we can actually fit the 2 in here widthwise perfectly. So that's an option. In fact, we could slide it over here like that. So yeah, the port will come out the side over here. Not a big deal because it's not going to be used all the time, but that is something to consider. So 2 ports here, HDMI in the back, the Ethernet in this side. But I did think about, and I did attempt it, I'll have to maybe pick up some different gear to do so, but I did think about desoldering all these pins here and the ones up here and actually removing this jack right from the board, which then it's just a thin board. It can mount anywhere in here, and then we can actually have the Ethernet port coming out the back. That would be ideal. But then of course you wonder, well, where's the other USB ports? Well, obviously one of those is going to get wired directly to this. We'll just probably take the lead, which is right here. We'll keep this end on here because that's what's going to clip right to the board, and possibly just hack the end off of this and just run the wires directly to this hub. And the other thing is we'll have to actually use these pads right here to actually connect the USB connection. So we'll just actually lay the wires right on that. We'll probably just use a thin cable to make that easier. We don't have to worry about power going to this. I also remove the solder from the holes over here so we can actually pass wires into here, and that's what's going to allow the DC in. And since the connectors are removed, we can also use that as well. So we'll use that as the in, and then the out going to the Pi, and that'll handle that nicely. So that's really all I could do for now. I may actually still end up using this piece of Vero board in here, because we still have 1 extra USB port that I would also like to come out the back. You know, if we can get something where it's, you know, the Ethernet port and possibly the USB port next to it. In fact, that's an idea like that, because they do fit next to each other. There's definitely enough room for the wire and something to plug in that way. So we'll have to see. Of course, like I said, that's going to be an upcoming video. With that, I want to thank you for watching this one. If you're not already a subscriber, you can click up here at the top. If you are a subscriber, hey, thanks for coming back. Also, check out these 2 videos over here. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next video.